Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're having a discussion with Omar Ramahi, a fellow that I don't know personally and I haven't met before this very moment, actually. Just exchanged a couple of emails. Now, he invited me to have a discussion with him about the significance of what he's discovered in his own research with respect to the Muslim practice of Friday prayer or Jumu'ah and the Khutba. These are primarily the topics here today. And I'm very, very pleased to have someone of his caliber to come on and share with us what he's known because I I consider myself someone on the outside looking in, you see, and I haven't been brought up in this culture, and I fear to tread in some waters, and this is one of them. I have my own reservations about Jumu'ah and people falling asleep every Friday during the khutbah, but I always wondered about that. There I was. I'd be sitting wide awake and looking around. It's difficult for me because I'm a bit crippled to get down on the carpet and get back up again on my own. But I sit there and I look around the middle of the khutbah and everybody's sleeping. Their heads are all nodding down or they're rocking back and forth or whatever. Everybody's eyes are closed and my God, they're drifting off into God knows where, but it's not what I imagine if the prophet did such a thing. It's not what I imagine he imagined they should be doing, you see. So, anyway, I've had my opinions and I'll keep them on reserve for right now. And I'll invite our dear brother, Omar Ramahi, who's come to me by way of, I think, my relationship to instructor Benjamin Bilal. So, Brother Ramahi, please
Sure.
introduce yourself. Tell our listening audience a little bit about what it is that you do, why you do it, and what you've discovered,
Yes.
inshallah.
Thank you very much. I actually I hearing I heard recently one of your program discussions, and I remember that you came across the topic of khutbah, Jumu'ah prayers, and and you raised some questions. I have done a lot of research on this in the past that I had turned it into a small book, but I never had the chance to publish it because it needs some attention, referencing, fixing
Hmm.
things, making things
Sure.
proper. Uh, by way of my background, I'm an academic, i.e., a professor of electrical and computer engineering at the University of Waterloo. So that's my profession. That's what I do to get bread on the table, so to speak.
Hmm.
But I'm interested. I developed a very strong interest in Islam in 2011. I started my deep research into the Quran and Islam, and it started as many questions. I, I I've been seeing a lot of contradictions in the way Muslims conduct their lives, not in Islam, but in the way Muslims conduct their lives. And I started putting questions that bothered me for many years, but finally it got to the point that I really couldn't take it anymore.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons that I couldn't take it anymore was the Jum'ah khutbah. By the way, I'm one of those who don't sleep in the Jum'ah khutbah because I stopped going there, so there's no reason for me to sleep. But it got to the point that I found it to be a medium of indoctrination, a
Mhm.
medium of control, a medium of subservience, a medium of hegemony.
Yes.
So I
Mhm.
so there was a I don't want to talk about myself. I want to talk about my experience that led me to this. So the year 2000, it was 2012, where I heard that there's a conference that's being held in Denmark, patronized by the Qatari government, one way or another, by some Islamic institutions in Qatar. And I submitted an abstract to that conference. I said, let's see, you know. The interesting thing in the so-called humanities and social sciences and these fields, they always like to have contributors from certified people.
Yes, yes.
And surprisingly, they're not abashed to say that. For instance, not to pick on any particular university, but there were conferences in the past that were held by Harvard University on topics related to Islam, and they explicitly say that the person has to have the following qualifications to submit a paper, which I found it to be ironic, you know. In the field of electrical engineering, you know, there are many conferences. If you submit, anyone can submit an abstract. Anyone can submit a paper. And so this paper is vetted for its soundness, for its scientific engineering contribution. So you don't have to have, so they don't tell you in advance that you have to have a PhD to contribute to this conference, nor do you have to have, you know, you can have a PhD in sociology, or you can have nothing at all. So this is how things progress in the world. You know, you submit something, it's vetted by a committee, and if the contribution is sound, then they accept it. So, anyways, back to this conference that was held. I remember 2012 or thereabout. So I submitted an abstract about Jumu'ah Khutba, and I had some ideas. So, well, make a long story short, first of all, they rejected my abstract, and I said, why? Is there a political reason why you're rejecting it? Then they turned their decision 180 degrees and said, okay, don't make a noise, please. You know, you can come and present your paper. So this gave me the impetus to delve further, because I just put an abstract without a paper. So I delved further into the subject, and I discovered it was an eye-opening discovery. Okay? So I'm gonna give you an abstract of my presentation right now in few lines. What I discovered, that there was no Jumu'ah khutbah in Islam. Zilch. Zero. Okay? So I did approach the subject from a very, very honest point of view, from a very honest standpoint. I wanted to discover something. I'm not paid by any institution to come up with a prefixed decision or conclusion. I'm not. You know, in fact, I don't need to do these things because I'm in electrical engineering. You know, I have a good job, and I have my position, and I have my claim and status. So, but it is that inquiry that the Quran keeps telling us about. Do not follow your forefathers blindly. You know, Allah is keep telling us, keep hammering at this point repeatedly. You know, that's one thing. And then Allah tells us, don't utter anything unless you understand what you say. You know, unless you understand. So I started looking into it, and I found, and I'll share with you what I found, and I'll you know, this may take very long time, but I'll summarize it within the hour that we have. And maybe in the future, if you like, we can touch about other aspects. Okay, but it was an eye-opener.
Please do.
There are many. So the first of all, I started looking into where did this come from? You know, the Jumu'ah Khutbah. Okay, now I am a person by background who never missed any Jumu'ah Khutbah in my life, because we were told that if you miss 3 Jumu'ahs intentionally in a row, you are a big sinner. Okay? Some hadith went to the point that if you miss 3 khutbahs, 3 Jumu'ahs consecutively, intentionally, you are outside the fold of Islam. I mean, look at it. It's really scary, isn't it? Okay?
Yes, it is.
So that's why, probably that explains why many people go and sleep and you find them sleeping. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not going to talk about historical aspects of the Jumu'ah khutbah. That is a subject of scholarly work. I'm not interested in collecting things and presenting them.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Okay.
that one can have a thesis on what happened. Like the conference that I went to, some people were discussing or doing scholarly work on the khutbas in the 12th century Turkey. You know,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think that's, in my opinion, that's a waste of resources. Okay, there could be some
Mm-hmm.
value gotten out of it, but I haven't seen these values defined. Nevertheless, so let's go to the khutbah. Khutbah is derived from the Arabic word khataba. Khataba. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Arabic words are derived from either a verb past tense or a noun, and I haven't seen a consensus on whether it is a noun or the past tense of the verb. Okay, but that's not a big
Mm-hmm.
deal. Okay,
Yes.
so khataba, it's a three vowel root describing the past tense. Okay, so in the Mus'haf, this is my first approach in the Mus'haf, aka the Quran. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's strictly speaking a Mus'haf, not a Quran. In the Mus'haf, derivatives of the word khataba, khataba appear 12 times, okay, according to the search engine that I've been using, okay? I could
Yes.
be, off by one or two,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that's correct because this
Yes.
is a very, very powerful search engine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, not a single use of the word khataba or any of its derivatives give gives the explicit meaning of a sermon. Not
Oh
one.
dear.
Okay.
Hmm.
Because of time, I'm not going to go over all of these. If you wish, I have a file that I can open and mention to
Mm-hmm.
you all these, occurrences. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it's, if you wish, we can do that. But
No,
let's
no, that's
no need,
not necessary now.
no need. Okay, because I
Perhaps
don't
at a
want
later
people.
time, just
Yeah,
press
yeah, I don't
on,
want
get
people
get
to
through this.
think that I'm
Yes.
cherry picking and I'm trying to fit
No,
something
no.
preconceived notion.
Yeah.
That's why. So everything is reference. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So now I said not a single use of the word khataba or any of its derivatives gives the explicit meaning of a sermon. Okay. Meanings of the word khataba, if we look at those 12 occurrences, range, okay, from addressed to talk to communicated with, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you do see a common theme. Okay. Khataba means to it has to do with expressing something, with conveying some information. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now the Arabic word, so that's the first word that came to my mind to dig its roots. Now the second Arabic word is Jum'ah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Jum'ah. And in it's must have the derivative of Jum'ah comes from most likely Jama'a. Jama'a, three-letter word. Jama'a means
Mm-hmm.
to collect. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Jama'a has some similar meaning to Kataba.
Mm-hmm.
Kataba is to collect. Okay. Jama'a is to collect, but maybe with a different connotation, to group things together for a different purpose. Okay, so
Okay.
uh, Jama'a has a different connotation, anyways, but they have similar meanings. Now, so uh, chapter two, the with that background, okay, first of all, Jum'ah appears once in the Mus'haf. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so Jum'ah appears as a name. Okay, and I'll come to the
Okay.
key sentence, I should say,
Sure.
to the key sentence, because recent discoveries, and I can talk about them later, made me rethink our uh, our usage or definition of the verse. Okay,
Okay.
because the findings, impressive findings that cannot be disputed, show that the verses of the Mus'haf were made verses way later on after the Prophet died. Okay,
Oh.
yeah, this is a very, very important. I mean, it's obvious. You look at the Birmingham manuscript, You look at the Tashkent manuscript, you look at the Tubkabi manuscript, you look at the Sana'a manuscript. There's no stars between the so-called verses. Okay, so anyways, it's not a side point, but this is an
Sure.
important point. Later, I found that the Muslim historians, imams, and so forth didn't dispute this fact. Interesting, but we were not told this. I discovered this very recently, just this last year. Now, this has extremely important implications that take us away to a different topic, so we're not going to go there. But suffice it to say that this is something that we should keep in mind. But for now, let's refer to verses. It doesn't change anything, by the way. Okay, it has other implications. But for now, so chapter 62 or surah. Sorry, I shouldn't say chapter. I think chapter is not the right way to call it. Surah, because a chapter means part of something. Chapter, right?
Yes.
The whole should be divided into chapters. But surah comes from sur. Sur is a boundary, is a fence. Okay.
Yes.
So I think it's better to call it a surah rather than a chapter. Okay. So Surah 62 verse 9. Okay, this is the key one. Okay. يا أيها الذين آمنوا. Okay. إذا I will say it in Arabic first, and then we will come to translate it in different types of translations to English.
Sure.
So it is the first one. There are three verses: 8, 9, and 10. 8, 9, and 10 in Surah 62. And I think the surah they named it Al-Jumu'ah. Okay, and by the way, naming the surahs, it turns out that the surahs have different names according to Muslim historians. But for now, the common one is Al-Jumu'ah. What we're talking about is I'm not saying that we have different Qur'ans. I'm saying that we have different ways that the Quran was divided. Okay. Anyways.
Yes.
So in verse 8, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة, and salah here is written with the lam, waw, and ta marbuta. Okay. So the pronunciation is important, and the way the script, the way it's written is important. So يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. Let me say the following one and the third, and then I'll translate. The next one, فإذا قضيت الصلاة, 2 again, لام واو تاء مربوطة, فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. Okay. The third one, وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين. Okay. Now when these are the three verses that they're connected in theme. Okay, that's why I'm focusing on these three. I cannot take one and say and run away with it. I cannot. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة, because this is what the scholars have been, or the Muslims, or the imams, or the traditionalists have been using as the final say that it is required, it's a must for Muslims to do the Jumu'ah, to do the Jumu'ah prayer, and to attend the Khutbah. Look, and to attend the Khutbah. All right, so the three are connected. Now let's when we translate, excuse me, when we translate, there's the classical translation, translation to English, and the classical translation to English is not a translation; it's a translation of the tafsir, of a certain tafsir.
Oh, I see. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course. I mean, how can you translate English? I mean, if you want to translate English, to another language, okay, you really have to look into how that particular phrase is used in that culture in which it was expressed.
Yes, of course.
Makes sense, Like, if I say, I lived in the U.S. for many years. If I say beat it, brother, beat it, it means just get out of here, right?
Yes, of course.
But I don't know, in the UK probably it means beat something probably, or
Yes.
or
it,
or,
it
or
could be misunderstood, of
it could
course.
be misunderstood, exactly. So I really have to understand that. Anyway, so there, do I like always to refer to two different categories of translation. Two different.
Yes.
The
Hmm.
first category is where the meaning is translated. Okay,
Hmm.
and if you look at the English translations, let's say on Quran.com, the translations, they give you about 14 different types of translations. It used to be three, now I think it has gone to 14. Okay.
Hmm.
Now these translations, look very carefully, they are really translations of the tafsir. Here's an example. So
Oh.
the first verse, that's why I say it and I stress this point, is that if someone wants to delve in Islam, learning the language, learning the medium of Islam is a must.
Mm.
Is a must. Okay. Now we can talk about this later on, but it's not as complex as people think. Just like, when I wanted to get a PhD in physics, I have to learn the universal mathematics
Yes.
language, right?
Hmm.
It's
Of
the
course.
medium of physics. I mean, I have
Hmm.
no choice. Okay, so the translation goes like this: "O you who believe between," and this is a common one. I'm not going to tell you exactly which one, but a common one. "O you who believe," between parentheses, Muslims. Now notice that mu'mineen is different from Muslimin. But let's move on. When the call is proclaimed for the salat, between parentheses, prayer, okay?
Hmm.
On the day of Friday, between parentheses, Jumu'ah prayer,
Hmm.
comes to the remembrance of Allah, okay? Between parentheses, Jumu'ah's religious talk, khutbah, and salat prayer, and leave off business and every other thing that is better for you if you did but know. Okay, this is a John, one of the translation that are. Now,
Hmm.
now notice just at the very end, in the verse, Allah says, "In kuntum ta'lamun." Look how it was translated. If for you, if you did but know. Arifa in Arabic, arifa is not alima. To know is different from to understand, isn't it?
Hmm. Yes.
A huge difference. To
Big
know,
and yes.
exactly, big difference. Look at the laxity, the looseness by which these verses are translated.
Hmm.
Then next one. Then when the Jum'ah Salat prayer is finished, you may disperse through the land and seek the bounty of Allah, between parentheses, by working, etc. And remember Allah much that you may be successful. And the third one, and when they see some merchandise or some amusement, between parentheses, beating of tambour, drum.
Hmm.
One translator, of course, inserted this because I'm not sure, but I think Ibn Kathir is the one who interpreted this way. I could be wrong. It could be a Tabari, one of them.
Hmm.
They disperse heading to it and leave you, between parentheses, Muhammad. Okay, look, the verse didn't say Muhammad. وَتَرَكُوكَ قَائِمًا. Okay,
Hmm.
say the last part of it. Say, quote. This is what the translation is saying. Say, quote. That which Allah has is better than any amusement or merchandise, and Allah is the best of providers. Again, look at this, okay? قُل, in the verse it says, قُل مَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ. قُل does not mean say. So they ended up quoting part of the verse as a quote, putting part of the verse as a quote. So there's a lot of problems in this classical way to translate the verse. Lots and lots of problems. Okay.
Hmm.
So my approach is to keep it as minimalist as possible.
Hmm.
If we don't know something, leave it transliterated.
Yes.
That's it. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm not a god. Allah
Yes,
said,
of course.
لا تكلف لا تكلف ما ليس نفسك. We should not exert more than, we should not do something that exceeds our capacity.
Of
Allah
course.
said it very clear. Okay, so all you who believe, all you who believe, when the call is heard from the prayer of the day of congregation, Jumu'ah, haste unto remembrance of Allah and leave your trading. That is better for you if you understand. Next, when the prayer is ended, then disperse in the land, okay, and seek Allah's bounty and remember Allah much. Dhikrullah, will come to it because this is important, that you may be successful. The third one, but when they spy some merchandise or pastime, they break away to it and leave you standing. Say, actually, sorry, I almost made the same mistake. Proclaim that which Allah has is better than pastime and merchandise, and Allah is the best provider. So this is a kind of a minimalist. It might not be perfect, by the way, but at
Of
least
course.
did not inject
Hmm.
fear into it. So now let's focus into the command, into the when Allah says dhikr, the word dhikr. Okay, فَاسْعُوا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. That's the first point we have to stop at. فَاسْعُوا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Now, ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Look, dhikr, from ذكر, past tense, 3 vowels. ذكر, remembered. Okay, remembered. So all the derivatives have to be connected, right? I watched your programs with Brother Bilal, and of course he could shed more light on this in the future. But all the derivatives have to be related to the theme of remembrance, remembered. Okay.
Yes.
Now, but here it appears as dhikrullah, dhikrullah. So dhikr is coined as a phrase, dhikrullah, 2 words working together, dhikrullah.
Okay.
Now, in the Mus'haf, there is al-dhikr, okay? But here, dhikrullah, okay? So something that is attributed to Allah rather
Yes.
than al-dhikr,
Hmm.
different, okay?
Yes.
Now, it's worth to look at how did dhikrullah appeared. Before we do that, this is one of the things that I use, call it a methodology, call it some rule that I
Sure.
use, is that if there's a word that is used in the Mus'haf, okay, it may have different meanings depending on the context. And this is,
Yes.
in all languages,
Hmm.
right? All languages. And the conjunctions and the words that connect to it kind of constrain the meaning. Okay,
Yes.
so the
Yes.
context constrain the meaning, the connectors, the way it shows up further constrains the meaning.
Yes.
We use the example of the idioms in English.
Yes.
Beat it. If I say
Hmm.
beat, well, beat could be many things, but
Yes.
beat it, it's really
Hmm.
constrained it. Okay,
Yes. Yes.
if the third is the context, as we said in the American culture, beat it, it means something. So now the context is important, but also the way it is used, the culture by which it's used, in other words, the style of the user
Yes.
is important. Okay,
Yes. Of
so
course.
these are my 4 rules to
Hmm.
understand. Okay, the style. In other words, here, who's the style refers to Allah. Allah has a style.
Yes.
His style is eternal. His style is not
Yes.
going to change with time. Okay, and we need to focus on his style. Okay,
Yes.
So if we look at them, there's 6. I think a total of 6. I could be wrong. There could be 7, but I think, according to the best of my knowledge, there are 6 where Dhikrullah appeared together. 58:19. Here's an example. 591. Surah 39, verse 22. Surah 63:9. Okay, just to give you one of these examples. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تلهكم أموالكم ولا أولادكم عن ذكر الله. O you who believe, don't let your money and let your offsprings take you away from ذكر الله. Okay. Another one. رجال لا تلهيهم تجارة ولا بيع عن ذكر الله. رجال, and this does not mean men. You know, this means that those who take the initiative, okay, they will not be distracted by commerce or selling or trade عن ذكر الله, from ذكر الله. If you look at the other one, وَيَصُدُّكُمْ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ, like in 591 and 58:19, استحوذ عليهم الشيطان فأنساهم ذكر الله. So all of them, you can see that ذكر الله has the same meaning. ذكر الله. Okay. Now, one of these verses is really interesting. Okay, before I go to that verse, which is important to focus on, Allah says in 15:9, the famous, very, very well-known phrase, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Okay, so when we talk about dhikr, al-dhikr, L with an L, definite, okay, then definitely I think it's not dhikrullah. Okay,
no, it's not.
dhikrullah could be understood that we're referring to something that belongs to Allah.
Yes.
But I don't think so. Dhikrullah, al-dhikr is the revelation, part of the revelation. The dhikr is not all the revelation, is part of the revelation. But dhikrullah is the remembrance of Allah. It's not something that belongs to Allah. It's something that is connected to Allah. That's my
yeah, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
So, all right. So, okay. So we established few preliminaries, and so far we're just looking at things to understand, to get a comfortable feeling of what these verses are all about. That's all so far. Okay. No rocket science. You know, people say rocket science.
Yes.
I think
no. It's
it's just putting things together and to see a pattern. You know, because
that's what it is.
That's what it is, exactly. The late Muhammad Shahrour, thanks to him, is that who really introduced this concept, which is a natural concept by which humans learn, and he deciphered that concept from the Mus'haf itself, and that is the concept of classification. You know, how do we know? How do we learn? Period. How do we learn? You classify. You know, when I see you, I see a man. Why do I see a man? Because my brain classified what a man looks like. So I don't see you. Basically, I see. Actually, I have a lot of signals that go into my brain. They look into a library and they come with a conclusion in maybe a femtosecond that this is a man.
Yes.
You see? So classification is really important. And that's what we're doing here. We classify to learn. Okay, rather than, of course, hearsay and gossip. Right?
Right.
All right. So if we look at 24:37, Surah 24, verse 37, Allah says, when I say, it doesn't mean he utters. رجال لا تلهيهم تجارة ولا بيع عن ذكر الله. Okay, رجال, those who take the initiative, they are not distracted by commerce or by from ذكر الله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة. Interesting. Look, لا تلهيهم تجارة عن ولا بيع عن ذكر الله. There's a wow. إقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة. So if I tell you I'm going to give you an apple and an orange and a banana.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not belittling your intellect, brother. I'm just explaining something to the audience. Forgive me.
Of course. Of
Yeah,
course.
bear with me. So if I say that to you, you would know immediately that I'm giving you three distinct things,
Exactly.
right? So it's not part of our brain to say I'm going to give you an apple and then an apple and an apple and an apple. I can say I'm giving you three apples.
Yes.
Okay, I can't, you know. So here, when I say I'm giving you, Allah says, Dhikrullah wa iqam as-salah wa ita az-zakah, three distinct things,
Mm-hmm.
which means the first conclusion is that Dhikrullah has nothing to do with iqam as-salah. First conclusion, there's iqam as-salah is one thing and Dhikrullah. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so of course this is very clear. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's extremely clear. It just needs an observation. That's all. Okay.
Yes, of course.
In other words, I am not making the argument. I'm not persuading you by giving you an argument. I'm just telling you, look.
Yeah. There it
So
is.
who's providing the argument? Allah.
Mm-hmm.
Allah is providing the argument, right?
Yes,
I'm,
of
I'm
course.
just, yeah, because when Allah created in a very complex way the stars, He just is telling us, look, don't argue, don't create it. You're not going to create the stars. Just look. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
observe, realize. That's all. So that's what
Mm-hmm.
we're doing here. So the first conclusion is that Jumu'ah is that Iqam as-Salah is different from Dhikrullah. All right.
Yeah.
So what is Dhikrullah? Dhikrullah, from when we looked at these six examples where Dhikrullah appeared, has nothing to do with a khutbah. There's no connection, none, zero,
Mm-hmm.
zero, no sermon. Okay.
Yes.
Absolutely, dhikrullah. فَاسْعُوا إِلَى dhikrullah. Okay? In fact, it's very, very derogatory towards Allah to connect the two. It's very, really, if you think about it
Mm-hmm.
that way, it's an insult.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, dhikrullah is to connect it with a khutbah. Now, so how did they get out of this? Okay, how did they get out of this? Is that they claimed that those framers of the parallel religion, those framers of the Umayyad Abbasid Hadith,
Yes.
and we'll come to the political aspects, which I think is probably 90% of the whole story is the political aspect.
Mm-hmm. Of
That
course.
they said dhikrullah must be khutbah. What? How? Dhikrullah is the khutbah? Okay. So there's no connection. There's no logical connection. Okay, fine. Maybe we're missing something. Of course, we have to have that modesty that we might be missing something. All right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we start digging into the books of hadith, into historical books.
Mm-hmm.
Brother, it's okay. Da'if, weak, strong, Hasan, it doesn't matter. Let's dig and find out. And guess
Okay.
what? I found that there's none. There's no command from the Prophet Muhammad Rasulullah. He never
Mm-hmm.
gave an order that the khutbah should be obligatory on Muslims. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
None, zero, zilch. Guess what? I dug deeply. I know it could be sometimes a waste of time, but then I came across one lonely hadith.
Uh-huh.
When I say hadith, I don't mean it's a narrative. It's something that the Prophet said. I'm using the
Mm-hmm.
classical definition. Hadith is what the framers of the Sunnah claim that the Prophet is alleged to have said it.
Yes.
In
Mm-hmm.
that technical framework, that's exactly what I'm using the term hadith. Okay, so and I will read it to you because I think it's important. It's one
Please.
hadith. Okay, because I could not find any. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
the hadith has two versions. Okay, two versions, not far off from each other. But honestly, when I read it the first time, I said, wait a minute. Before I looked into the so-called authenticity criteria,
Yes.
I said, wait a minute, this is something really fishy. I mean, they've gone to the extreme to fabricate a hadith that are really, really stupid. This is the
Mm-hmm.
hadith. It says, عن جابر بن عبد الله. Okay, رضي الله عنه. Now, Jabir, I don't know who Jabir is this, but
Mm-hmm.
the hadith, the scientist, if there's such thing, there's no such thing, by the way. There's no
Mm-hmm.
such
Yes.
hadith science. It's hearsay. It's okay.
Yes, of
It's
course.
gossip and hearsay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Jabir ibn Abdullah, who died in the year 78. Okay, Hijri. Okay, he said the Prophet خطبنا Rasulullah. خطبنا. He used the word خطبنا Rasulullah, not the Prophet told us. No, خطبنا. Okay. And he said, quote, أعلم, understand, أن الله تعالى, that Allah تعالى قد افترض عليكم الجمعة, that Allah has ordained, commanded you to do the Jumu'ah في مقام هذا. I don't know what that means. Maybe he meant now. He made it obligatory. في يوم هذا في مقام هذا في يوم هذا في شهر هذا. In this place, in this day, in this month. Notice, why would you say month? You know,
Mm-hmm.
why would you say month? The Jum'ah comes 4 times a month,
Mm-hmm.
not once a month. Okay.
Yes, yes.
من عام هذا, from this year. I mean, is he referring to this specific day in history? Maybe. فمن تركها, whoever leaves it, فمن تركها في حياتي أو بعد مماتي. Even the language is strange. Even the language of this hadith is very strange. Whoever left it in my lifetime or after I die, وله إمام عادل أو جائر, and he has an imam who is fair, just, or a tyrant. استخفافا بها, he left, now he continues, استخفافا بها, because he took it lightly, وجحودا لها, and not believing in it, فلا جمع الله شمله. Okay, now these are big words that I have to give you a satisfactory, what should I say, translation of. Okay, so that let me, have the hadith down here. All right, bear with me. So here, okay, whoever abandons it, whether during my lifetime or after I'm gone, whether he has a just or an unjust ruler, whether he takes it lightly or denies that it is obligatory. Look, the Prophet, according to this man, continues, may Allah cause him to lose all sense of tranquility and contentment, and may he not bless him in his affairs. Indeed, his prayer will not be valid, his zakat will not be valid, his hajj will not be valid, his fasting will not be valid, and his righteous deeds will not be accepted until he repents. Whoever repents, Allah will accept his repentance. Then he continues, the Prophet, i.e., no woman should be appointed as Imam over a man, or Bedouin should be appointed as Imam over a Muhajir meaning an immigrant. Okay, so I will stop here. I will not continue with the rest of the hadith. You know, this is the only one. It's, of course, it's outlandish. It's just bizarre, this hadith. But then I found out that this hadith is da'if, is weak, according
Mm-hmm.
to the classification, according to the hadith scientists. They classified it as
Yeah.
weak, and they
Mm-hmm.
poked so many holes into the sanad, into the chain of transmitters. One of them is a liar, one of them is this, one of them is that.
Mm-hmm.
What? So this is the only one. Notice.
Yes.
And it's a big lie. Now,
Yeah.
of course,
Yeah.
a side point,
Yeah.
if this is a weak hadith, why in the world did they keep it in these compendia of hadith? Why? Isn't that an interesting question? Why did it
Well,
deepen? Because
yes.
I heard someone saying recently, I forgive me, I don't remember his name because I like to give credit where it's due. He raised this question. He raised
Hmm.
this question that I'm sharing with you. And
Yes.
he said he had a brilliant thought. He said, maybe later they will turn it into a strong hadith
Yes.
based on experience.
Yeah.
I love that because
Yes.
to
Yes.
prove
Yes.
him to prove that his
Mm.
point is valid or plausible.
Yes.
Al Albani, the one who died in 1999. Al
Hmm.
Albani was a scholar from Albania, but he lived in the Arab world most of his life. He's a favorite of the Salafi people. He's a darling of the Salafi people.
Hmm.
He turned a hadith after what, 1200 years. He turned some ahadith of Bukhari into da'if and some into strong. So it wasn't crazy thought that
Uh-huh.
they leave these ahadith,
Yes.
a weak hadith.
Yes.
Maybe in the future they will turn it and they'll say, oh no, we realize that this man who is part of the Senate, i.e. the chain, oh, we realize that he really was honest,
Yes.
not a
Yes.
liar,
Yes.
so we should take his
Yes.
you know
Yeah.
I know.
We got that by hearsay as well. Yeah.
Yes, but I know some of this might be laughable, but I'm really sorry, this is our
Yeah.
history, right?
Yeah. Unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very sad, dear brother.
it,
Um,
yeah.
Listen, I would like to continue this dialogue. Is that possible? Is it some? Is it? Do you see yourself being able to maybe fit an hour in every week or every other week with me
Uh,
to
I would
discuss these
I
things?
would love to because we may not have the time today, but what is
Yeah.
critical is to go over the political side
Yes.
of this machination of this game.
Well, I'm very interested in the historicity of the theological corruptions and the political machinations as well. I'm very interested in that because they're never discussed. Never.
You, you know
So,
you, you know, brother,
yes.
uh, I, in all honesty and sincerity, when I wrote that abstract in 2012, I just sat
Hmm.
down and I said to myself, I see a huge political connection.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and alhamdulillah, recently I see many people saying the same thing.
Yes.
They are connecting because you know why? I just had that thought. I'm not
Hmm.
saying I'm original. I'm sure people
Yes.
1200 years ago had similar thoughts. They were not
Hmm.
dumb. Okay. But
Yes. Yes.
recently, with the availability of information, I can easily dig up a lot of information. Okay,
Yes.
with
Hmm.
this is causing acceleration in our understanding of Islam. I
Yes, it
think.
is.
Okay,
Yes. Hmm.
because Allah, I think that beautiful interpretation. وَنُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ.
Hmm.
It's not that Allah will blow into something. No, نُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ, نُفِخَ acceleration. Allah is talking about the end of time. There will be acceleration in how
Yes.
things happen. Okay, and
Yes.
right now. We really at the fingertips we can dig up a lot of documents, but it's interesting. Of course, I'll be happy to continue this discussion, but I want to just to tell you like a snippet of what I would like to talk about later on is that how the governments control this instrument, this Islamic instrument, which has nothing to do with Islam. And what
Yes.
is interesting, brother, is that of course people say, wait a minute, if the Prophet lived 8 9 years in Medina after the alleged claim that it was ordained in the second year Hijri, the khutbah.
Yes.
Of
Hmm.
course, some other Muslim scholars say it was ordained during Mecca, but in Mecca the Prophet couldn't do it because of the
Yes.
the condition of Muslims. But it means that the Prophet must have given about 500 khutbas.
Yes.
And in Medina, I've heard a lot of this, and this is adds validity to the claim that there's no such thing. Okay, but I'm trying to go further into foundational aspects to conclude that there's no such thing. But the other question that I just raised and many people raised is a valid question. If the Prophet gave 500 khutbas, where are they? Where are they? There's nowhere to be found. And if he gave 500 khutbas, let's say people have listened to 200 or 300, there should be many who reported these khutbas.
Yes, of course.
None of it. Okay. And then when we refer to the khutbah of the Hajjat al-Wada', I'm not denying, I don't deny that there were sermons that the Prophet gave. Absolutely. He was a leader, he was a messenger, he was a prophet, he was an imam. So, of course, there were sermons given, but were they given as part of a so-called ordained obligatory Jumu'ah instrument, Islamic instrument? I don't think so. Now, then you see these all there's so many contradictions. Another narrative says that one Sahabi, and Sahabi is a technical term. Again, we can talk about what that means later on, but Sahabi is a purely technical term. Okay. He said that there were 2,000 khutbas. Well, 2,000 khutbas, how many years it would take for the Prophet to give 2,000 khutbas? Divide 2,000 khutbas by what, 50 plus weeks a year. That goes way beyond the Prophet's life in Medina and Mecca combined as a prophet. All of these contradictions. But what is interesting, from these historical snippets, this is my approach. I'm not a historian, but I think that there's all of these narratives can give you some flavor of what has happened, a flavor. Yes. So what we see is that when did the issue of the khutbah started coming in the narratives? Guess what? Yes. When the Umayyad came to power. Interesting.
Yes.
The claim, whether it's correct or not correct, of cursing Ali on the members, on the pulpits, all of this is related to what? The Umayyad period, the Umayyad era, right?
Yes.
Notice, because most likely, and we don't have a firm proof, but most likely the institutionalizing of the khutbah was the work of the Umayyad. Most likely. Because in a summary, you group people together, you Islamically mandate their presence, and you dish out your propaganda to them, right?
Yes, of course.
You dish out the propaganda to the point that they came up with the fiqh. Look, fiqh of al-Jum'ah. Brother, there's no hadith that tells you that Jum'ah is obligatory, yet they came up with the fiqh of al-Jum'ah. So in other words, you have to wash, you have to get up early, you have to take the longest path to the masjid. And guess what? And you shut up during the entire proceedings. You shut up. If you tell, this is what we were told, if you tell the person next to you, brother, be quiet, your khutbah, your Jum'ah is null and void.
Oh, gosh.
Absolutely. That's what we grew up to believe in. Don't even tell him, be quiet, because then your Jum'ah is nullified. And let alone questioning the khatib.
Yes.
And this is one of the experiences I've had here at the University of Waterloo. One time, just a backward person came and gave a khutbah, and I couldn't take it. I mean, I had to let go, talk to him, or my blood pressure would go up the roof.
Oh, gosh.
So I went after the Jumu'ah. Immediately, I told him, brother, what in the world are you talking about? What is this nonsense? I'm sorry, I use these words because he just went overboard. And there was a big commotion after that. I said, please, I mean, what are you telling us? I mean, be careful. So my point is, I'm not going to go into the details, but my point is that they don't allow for a dialogue. a multilogue, a discussion, nothing. You get the dictates from the ruler through the Islamic instrument. Hence, this amalgamation between the state and the religion, and so you don't know which is which, and then. Of course, there's so many fascinating examples. In Saudi Arabia, the khatibs of the masjid of the haram, they used to be told to curse the Jews and the Christians.
Yes.
Okay. Of course, that's preposterous. How could you curse the
Of
Jews?
Course.
Okay.
Of course.
Yeah. And guess what? Later they dropped it. Who dropped it? The king said, "Don't do it anymore." Okay. I mean, it's really making it's trivializing Islam. Anyways, back to the khutbah thing. This I just gave in this short summary, just to validate that, to prove to you that all my research, and I dug deeply, by the way, into what the proponents, the opponents, and all of that, to find out if there is any valid narratives or narratives that support the obligatory status as claimed of the khutbah. Now, interesting fact, the following is that later the Hanafi Imams, and that's a generic description, we don't have an accurate description, the Malikis, the Hanafis, the Shafi'is, the Hanbalis, all had a consensus that the khutbah is obligatory. Okay, and this instrument of ijma' is another joke, right?
Yes, of course.
So, but it's really interesting. This is what I found, and there's no dispute that this was a fact, according to him even, that Al-Hasan al-Basri, very reputable man who lived very close to the time of the Prophet, he never said that it was obligatory. He said it's something that is recommended. So the latter scholars or imams or shuyukh dismissed what he said completely. At least they should have taken his commentary into consideration.
Where did you find this commentary again?
Al-Hasan al-Basri. I can send you references. Al-Hasan al-Basri is considered to be one of the first quote-unquote Sufis in Islam. Very, very, very reputable, pious man. Al-Hasan al-Basri, very, very, and he is claimed to have said it's mustahab. It's something good, recommended, but not obligatory.
Okay? Yes, of course.
So, but I have some of the references that I dug. One of them is a book about the khutbah, because in the Indo-Pakistani subcontinent, especially in Pakistan and Bangladesh, this is they take it much more seriously than anything else in the world. Okay? And I found a book about this by a certain Pakistani imam, and it's really hilarious. There's no arguments. I mean, he's trying to tell you that as-salah, one of the verses in the Mus'haf, refers to the Jumu'ah khutbah. I mean, to that level, but when people don't question anything, and when people think that they are so little, this culture of marginalization that Muslims have been subjected to, it will take years to take that dirt off. It's like the parallel situation that I think of is when the army, this happens in armies like in the US, when they bring young recruits, they crush their personality, right?
Yes, of course.
And I've seen these, when they start doing push-ups and running in the morning and all that, and sometimes they ask him, repeat after me, I'm a dog. Really, literally. They tell them, repeat after me, I'm a dog. And the young recruits start saying, I'm a dog. And the reason, the psychological background behind this is that they want to completely crush their, deflate whatever personality they have and build it slowly, from ground up, so that they will be obedient. This is exactly what happened to Muslims. Their personality was crushed completely. They're afraid to think. They're afraid to question, because, you know why? Because Here's an example. In Jumu'ah, you're asked to shut up. Now,
Yeah.
if Jum'ah is the only time where I see you, I see other brothers, where the only, here in Canada, social life is miserable, there's no one you could
Hmm.
see. So Jum'ah is the only place where you go and see people, and you're
Yes.
told to shut up. So the only thing that I notice people do, guess what? Is they talk about social life, gossip after the Jum'ah prayer. When they go
Hmm.
out of the masjid, they
Hmm.
started talking about things that have nothing to do, in my experience, with religion. Nothing.
Hmm.
But allow me, before we conclude today, is to say the following. Now, how do we understand this verse? How do we understand this important verse? وَإِذَا نُودِيَ لِلصَّلَاةِ مِنْ يَوْمِ الْجُمُعَةِ فَاسْعَوْا إِلَىٰ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. A summary of my understanding is Allah is dedicating, is telling us, dedicate part of Friday for remembrance of Allah, meaning for the Mus'haf, for the Quran. Dedicate part of it to study
Hmm.
the Quran. That's how I interpret it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. And
Hmm.
it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Not to
Hmm.
not to go and listen to the dictates of the ruler, okay?
Yes.
But just dedicate, not forcing us, but encouraging us, because there's no enforcement and there's no specific time frame or anything. It's a light-hearted, in my opinion, recommendation. That's
Yes.
one. Excuse me. That's one interpretation. The second interpretation, which is plausible, is that this
Yes.
is specific to the prophet. These verses are part of the qasas, part of the stories of our prophet. Just like there are stories of other prophets, these
Hmm.
are this is part of the stories of Muhammad. And
Hmm. Yeah.
that's not outland, that's not completely implausible, because Allah says, refers to him, وَإِذَا رَأُوا تِجَارَةً, to the end of it. Sorry, فَإِذَا قُضِيَتِ الصَّلَاةِ, sorry, where is it? وَإِذَا رَأُوا تِجَارَةً أَوْ لَهُ, and if they see commerce or waste of activities that are useless, لهوا, انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما, and they leave you standing. So, from that point of view, this could be something that describes, gives us a snippet of what happened at the time of the prophet. That's not
Hmm.
implausible at all. Because what is the message? The message is that the so called Sahaba, those who used to pray with him, okay, with the prophet,
Hmm.
guess what? They would leave him standing and they would leave. They would go on and leave him alone. So much for some of them's commitment, their commitment to the prophet. Okay, and of course,
Yes.
of course, the Hadith and Sunnah framers glorified them to the point of making them infallible, number one, and to the point of making their acts as part of Islam.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, brother, I have to stop us here because I have another engagement, and I want to continue with you. What days is it possible for you to meet? Is this a good time on Mondays or?
This is a good time. We can, inshallah, exchange messages. This is a good
Okay,
time, inshallah.
very good. Then let's try to meet again on Monday this time. And if that's inconvenient, we'll change the time between now and
Excellent.
then, inshallah. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Professor.
Thank you,
I
brother.
really appreciate your perspective, and I want to hear more on what it is that you've
That's very
discovered.
kind of you, inshallah.
Uh, I really appreciate scholars like yourself who are operating under their own initiative.
Thank you,
So,
brother. Thank you. Thank you for giving
what's
me the
you're
opportunity
welcome.
to share these
You're
ideas.
welcome. What's